Everyone thinks they know Appalachia. Banjos, coal seams, postcard overlooks with a hawk circling somewhere convenient. But somebody was stacking stone across these ridgelines long before any of that arrived. Walls, terraces, and hilltop enclosures older than every explanation the locals got in school. Some of these walls have answers. The 20 on this list are ranked by how badly those answers hold up. Number 20, Fort Ancient, Oregonia, Warren County, Ohio. Start with the largest hilltop enclosure in North America, which most Americans cannot name. It sits on a bluff above the Little Miami River, on the western edge of the Appalachian Plateau, and it is enormous. Roughly 3.5 miles of earth and stone walls. In places, 23 feet high. All of it wrapping a 100-acre summit built 2,000 years ago by people archaeologists file under the Hopewell culture, one basket of earth at a time, tens of millions of basket loads, carried uphill by hand. In 2023, Fort Ancient finally made the UNESCO World Heritage List. That puts it in the same registry as the Pyramids of Giza and the Great Wall of China. Most of the country shrugged. Here's the correction. It isn't a fort. There are around 67 gaps cut through the walls, which is 66 more than any defender would want, and several of them line up precisely with solstice sunrises and the long, slow cycles of the moon. Some of those lunar alignments track a cycle that takes 18.6 years to complete, which means someone stood on this hill watching the sky carefully enough, for long enough, to catch a pattern most modern people have never heard of. The walls aren't protecting anything. They're keeping time. Fort Ancient is a calendar the size of a neighborhood, and it was running before Rome finished falling. It's also the best documented site on this entire list. That's exactly why it ranks last. Number 19, Sacravia and the Marietta Earthworks, Marietta, Washington County, Ohio. Marietta is a town that built itself inside a ruin and then paved over most of it. When New England settlers landed at the junction of the Muskingum and the Ohio in 1788, they found a full ceremonial complex waiting for them. Mounds, walled enclosures, and a graded avenue running up from the river between two parallel earthen walls. They were educated men, and they were genuinely impressed. Impressed enough to give the avenue a Latin name, the Sacra Via, the Sacred Way, and practical enough to sell its walls off as construction fill within a couple of generations. What survives is strange to see. The Quadranaiu, a huge flat-top platform mound, sits in a city park with houses lining the street around it. The Conus, a conical burial mound still ringed by the remnant of its ancient ditch, stands in the middle of the town cemetery, with Revolutionary War officers buried in neat rows around a monument 2,000 years older than the country they fought for. The Sacred Way itself is now a sloping green street with a historical marker. Preservation, Appalachian style. Keep the mound, mow around it. Number 18, Glenford Fort, Glenford, Perry County, Ohio. This one encloses an entire hilltop in farm country nobody drives through on purpose. Above the village of Glenford, in the Appalachian Hills of Perry County, a sandstone wall traces the rim of a flat-topped bluff, closing off something like 26 acres, with a small stone mound sitting quietly inside. Stand up there today and you can follow it. A low spine of stacked rock running through the trees, softened by 2,000 falls worth of leaves. It used to be much more. For 2 centuries, local farmers treated the wall as a free quarry, hauling off wagon load after wagon load of ancient construction to build foundations, culverts, and property lines. The builders are generally placed in the Adena to Hopewell Range, which is a polite way of saying a very long time ago. And the fort label falls apart on contact because the hilltop has no water source. Nobody survives a siege without water, which means nobody was ever meant to. Defense wasn't the point. The first mystery of Appalachian walls isn't who built this one. It's why nobody outside the county has ever heard of it. Number 17, Rock Eagle Effigy, Eatonton, Putnam County, Georgia. In the Georgia uplands, at Appalachia's southern doorstep, someone built a bird out of milky white quartz, a bird you can only properly see from the top of a stone observation tower, because it measures roughly 120 feet from wingtip to wingtip. Rock Eagle is a stone effigy mound, thousands upon thousands of quartzite rocks, gathered, sorted by hand, and laid down until the shape of a great raptor emerged from the ground, wings spread, head turned in profile. A few miles away sits its sibling, Rock Hawk. Slightly rougher, equally unexplained. Archaeologists attribute both to woodland period builders, likely closer to 2,000 years old than one, and that's about where the confidence ends. Nobody knows why quartz, when ordinary fieldstone was everywhere and easier to gather. Nobody knows why a bird. Nobody knows why here, because these are the only two effigy mounds of their kind east of the Mississippi. No village site attached. No clear burials to anchor a theory. Consider what that means. Someone spent months, maybe years, sorting pale stones by hand until a bird appeared, and then left it lying flat against the earth, where only the sky could see it. Number 16. Indian Fort Mountain, Berea, Madison County, Kentucky. The Pinnacles. Above Berea are some of the busiest day hiking trails in Kentucky, and nearly everyone on them walks straight past the reason the mountain has its name. The ridge belongs to Berea College, which has protected its forest for over a century, and hikers grind up the switchbacks for the clifftop overlooks. Genuinely worth it. All sandstone drop-offs and blue distance rolling east toward the mountains. But look at the terrain the way its old occupants did. The clifftops form a natural fortress, sheer on most sides, reachable only through a handful of gaps and notches. And in those gaps, people built stone walls. Archaeologists tie the walling to late prehistoric use, when the summit served as a walled refuge, let the cliffs do most of the work, then seal the doors with stone. It's terrain reading of a very high order, and it's completely invisible from the trail. Because when you walk up through one of those notches, you're walking through the front gate, without ever recognizing it as a gate. The busiest trail in the region runs directly through a fort. Almost nobody notices, which, to be fair, was probably the idea. Number 15. Portsmouth. Earthworks, Scioto County, Ohio, and Greenup County, Kentucky. Here's an ancient complex so large it crosses a state line, and the Ohio River to do it. 2,000 years ago, the floodplain where the Scioto meets the Ohio held one of the biggest earthwork systems on the continent. Enclosures, mounds, and long formal avenues bounded by parallel walls, some running for miles across the bottomlands. The walled roads on the Ohio side pointed across the river toward horseshoe-shaped enclosures on the Kentucky side. Read that again. The complex was designed as a single system, with a major American river running through the middle of it. Most of it is gone now, plowed under, built over, buried beneath Portsmouth's streets. The best surviving piece sits in the city's Mound Park, a horseshoe embankment with a neighborhood around it, kids cutting across grass that used to be a ceremonial precinct. But think about what those parallel walls imply. You don't build formal, walled avenues for terrain nobody moves through. This was organized traffic, processions, gatherings, river crossings, infrastructure for a population coordinating across both banks. 2 millennia before a bridge existed there. Appalachia had an interstate before it had states. Number 14, Fort Hill, Highland County, Ohio. One of the best preserved ancient enclosures in North America is hiding in one of Ohio's least visited counties, and the thing that saved it was neglect. Fort Hill is a Hopewell-era hilltop enclosure, an embankment of earth and stone running about 1.5 miles around the summit, standing up to 15 feet high in places. The forest here was never fully cleared, so old-growth timber grew up over the walls and quietly protected them, while the plow erased their cousins across the rest of the state. Walk the perimeter today, under trees older than the Constitution, and you can follow the entire circuit. Almost nowhere else in America allows that. Then count the openings. There are 33 gateways cut through the embankment, 33 separate holes in your supposed defenses, which makes Fort Hill about as military as a bandstand. Like Fort Ancient, the name is a settler's guess that stuck. The evidence points towards ceremony, a summit deliberately enclosed, entered, and used for purposes the builders never wrote down. It's a Stonehenge-scale commitment of human labor. It sits behind a gravel parking lot and a trail register. Number 13, Judaculla Rock, Cullowhee, Jackson County, North Carolina. Now the list changes character, because up to this point, every site has had a solid explanation. From here, the explanations start to thin. In a quiet valley in Jackson County sits the most heavily carved boulder in the eastern United States, and no living person can read it. Judaculla Rock is a slab of soapstone covered edge to edge with more than 1,500 petroglyph motifs, cupules, lines, branching figures, shapes that look almost like writing and refuse to behave like it. The carving may span thousands of years of return visits, layered generation over generation, and alongside the symbols, you can still see the scars where people quarried soapstone bowls straight out of the living rock. The Cherokee, whose land this is and whose stories hold this valley, connect the boulder to Sulkalu, Judaculla, the slant-eyed giant of the High Balds, who was said to have marked the stone himself. Researchers have proposed a map, a boundary marker, a record of events, a ceremonial tally. Every theory works partially, and none works completely, because the honest answer is that the writing outlived its readers. The message survived. The language didn't. Number 12, the Blue Ridge Stone Cairn Fields, Nelson and Rockbridge Counties, Virginia. Across parts of the Virginia Blue Ridge, whole hillsides carry stacked stone piles, dozens per site, some carefully constructed, many sitting on slopes too steep for any sensible farming. And they've fueled a 100-year argument about what they are. One camp says settler field clearing, colonial and later farmers pulling rock out of the ground and piling it up, the way farmers everywhere always have. The other camp, which now includes tribal voices pushing for formal recognition of ceremonial stone landscapes across the East, argues that at least some of these cairn fields are indigenous, deliberate, meaningful constructions that predate the farms entirely. The frustrating part is that a pile of stones doesn't carbon date, so the debate stays live, site by site, with serious archaeologists genuinely split. But notice what both camps quietly agree on. The piles are deliberate. Somebody chose these slopes, chose these stones, stacked them with care over and over across entire hillsides. Nobody stacks stone that carefully by accident. The real fight isn't over the rocks. It's over whose history got written down and who's got a plow driven through it. Number 11, the Stonefish Weirs of the Little Tennessee, Macon County, North Carolina. Some walls on this list hide in forests. These hide underwater. Wait for a dry August, when the Little Tennessee River drops a few feet and V-shaped walls of stacked stone surface in the shallows, arms reaching out from both banks, the point aimed downstream. They're fish weirs. Funnel the current, funnel the fish, set a basket trap at the apex, and the river feeds your town. Dozens survive in the rivers of western North Carolina, and this valley was the Cherokee heartland. The old towns of Cowie and Niquossee stood on these very banks. Here's where the explanation starts to fray. The function is settled. The age is not. Some weirs were built or rebuilt by white settlers who copied a design that plainly worked. Others are argued to be Cherokee constructions centuries older than any farm around them. and a stone wall standing in moving water is nearly impossible to date because the river keeps editing it. Every flood rearranges the evidence. Every repair resets the clock. Archaeologists can map a weir stone by stone and still not tell you whether it's 150 years old or many centuries older. So each one becomes its own quiet argument, colonial copy, or ancient original patched by every generation since. Either way, it's the only kind of wall on this list still doing its job. You just have to wait for the river to get out of the way. And that closes the first half of the map. Everything so far had at least one theory standing on solid legs: a calendar, a refuge, a fish trap. That comfort ends here. From this point forward, the official answers get quieter, and the sites get harder to explain away. Number 10, the Putnam County Stone Chambers, Hudson Highlands, New York. Scattered through the Hudson Highlands of southern New York are dozens of dry stone chambers built into hillsides, more than 100 documented in Putnam County alone, and two explanations that cannot both be true. The chambers are serious construction, walls of fitted stone, roofed with corbelled slabs or single massive capstones, dug into slopes like small artificial caves. Step inside one and the temperature drops, the sound deadens, and daylight shrinks to a doorway-shaped rectangle behind you. The mainstream reading is straightforward and mostly convincing. Colonial root cellars, built by farmers who needed cold storage and had more rock than money. For the majority of the chambers, that answer probably holds. The problem is the minority. Some entrances are claimed to face the winter solstice sunrise, and researchers have spent decades arguing over whether certain chambers show construction styles that don't match colonial farm work at all. Skeptics answer, reasonably, that solstice alignments happen by chance when you build enough doorways facing roughly southeast. Neither side has closed the case in 100 years of trying, so either some Hudson Valley farmers were unusually poetic about potatoes, or a few of these chambers are telling a story older than the farms. Number 9, the Oley Hills site, Berks County, Pennsylvania. In the hills of eastern Pennsylvania sits a summit covered in cairns, stone walls, and one boulder deliberately wrapped in built stonework. All of it on land that was never good farmland. Researchers have documented the Oley Hills site for decades, and the more carefully it gets mapped, the stranger it gets. There are serpentine walls that snake across the ridge, start nowhere in particular, and stop the same way, enclosing nothing. There is a large terraced stone platform built with genuine skill. There are cairns stacked directly against bedrock outcrops, as if the natural rock itself were the point. The default explanation for stone walls in Pennsylvania is colonial field clearing, and it is usually correct, but field clearing walls enclose fields. That is their entire job description. These enclose nothing, which is the whole problem. Advocates argue this is an indigenous ceremonial stone landscape. Skeptics keep looking for a farmer with extremely eccentric habits. The land itself votes against the farmer. Thin soil, steep grades, the last ground anyone would clear for planting. Walls that fence nothing in are trying to say something else. At Oley Hills, we just haven't learned to listen yet. Number 8, the Welsh Fort walls at DeSoto Falls, DeKalb County, Alabama. Now we leave the debated sites behind and enter stranger territory, the walls that collected legends. At Appalachia's southern tip, in the Little River Canyon country of northeastern Alabama, old stonework near DeSoto Falls got attached to one of the strangest stories in American history. That medieval Welshmen built fortifications on Lookout Mountain 3 centuries before Columbus. The legend says Prince Madoc of Wales sailed west around 1170, landed at Mobile Bay, and pushed inland, his people building stone defenses as they retreated up the river valleys. This was not a fringe whisper. The Daughters of the American Revolution once mounted an official plaque at Fort Morgan, crediting Maddox's landing. The plaque has since been removed, the story has not. Here is what holds up. The stonework in the region is real, and archaeologists attribute the area's fortification remnants to native builders, which was always the obvious answer, sitting in plain sight. And that is the genuinely revealing part. For generations, settlers found it easier to believe a Welsh prince crossed the Atlantic in the 12th century than to credit the people actually living here with stacking stone. The myth says Europeans built it. The stone says otherwise, and the stone was here first. Number 7. Devil's Backbone, 14 Mile Creek, Clark County, Indiana. The Maddox story doesn't stop in Alabama. Follow the Ohio River northwest to the Falls of the Ohio Corridor, and you reach the Devil's Backbone, a narrow ridge above 14 Mile Creek in Clark County, Indiana, where 19th century writers swore an ancient fortress once stood. Early accounts describe stone walls sealing the neck of the ridge, turning the whole promontory into a defended stronghold with water on 3 sides. Local tradition wired it straight into the legend. This, supposedly, was where Maddox's Welsh colonists made their last stand, complete with frontier tales of Welsh-speaking Indians encountered downriver. Then the site was largely destroyed. Quarrying, construction, cement works, time. The walls those old writers described mostly vanished, and that's exactly why the legend never died. You can't excavate a story. With the physical evidence gone, the claims can't be tested. So they float on, unfalsifiable, reprinting themselves in books for 2 centuries. The destruction is the verifiable part. The Welsh remain folklore here, same as in Alabama. The best defended fort in the Ohio Valley turns out to be a story. Nothing protects a legend like removing the evidence. Number 6. Grave Creek Mound, Moundsville, Marshall County, West Virginia. In Moundsville, West Virginia, a 69-foot ancient monument stands with a Gothic-towered former maximum security prison directly across the street. And somehow, that's not the strange part. Grave Creek Mound is one of the largest conical burial mounds in the Americas, roughly 60,000 tons of earth, moved by Adena people more than 2,000 years ago, basket by basket, with no wheels, no draft animals, and no metal tools. For comparison, that's the weight of about 150 fully loaded jumbo jets, carried by hand. Originally, it didn't stand alone. A moat circled the mound, backed by an earthen parapet wall, an entire design precinct that the growing town gradually erased until only the mound itself survived. An island of deep time surrounded by parking. Then came the embarrassment. In the 1800s, excavators produced a small inscribed sandstone tablet supposedly found inside, the Grave Creek Stone, covered in what looked like Old World lettering. It detoured serious scholars for the better part of a century before being exposed as a hoax. So the ledger reads like this. The wall around it is gone, the one written record was fake, and the actual builders left no writing at all. The town is literally named for the mound. Most of it drives past without a glance. Number 5. Spruce Hill Earthworks, Ross County, Ohio. Here's where the top 5 begins. And the top 5 is where explanation stops keeping up with evidence. Above Paint Creek Valley in Ross County, Ohio, a Hopewell-era stone wall runs more than 2 miles around a hilltop, enclosing roughly 140 acres. That alone would earn a spot on this list. But at some of its gateways, 19th century surveyors reported something stranger. Stone that had been burned until it glazed. Vitrified rock. Fused, fire-glassed sandstone, which does not happen over a cooking fire because ordinary flames do not come close to the temperatures required. Spruce Hill has attracted fringe theories for exactly that reason. Ancient furnaces, lost technology, the usual suspects. The mainstream reading is both simpler and, frankly, more impressive. Enormous, deliberate, sustained fires, likely burned at the gateways on purpose, possibly as signals visible the length of the valley, possibly as ceremony, fed and maintained until the stone itself began to change. Hold both facts at once. Someone hauled millions of stones up a steep-sided hill to build a 2-mile wall. Then someone burned fires against that wall hot enough and long enough to glaze rock. The honest mystery is not aliens. It is labor, organization, and fire on a scale we struggle to picture. You do not melt sandstone by accident. Number 4. The Mount Carbon Stone Walls, Fayette County, West Virginia. On Armstrong Mountain, above the coal town of Mount Carbon and the Kanawha River, sit miles of dry stacked stone walls with no farms, no fields, and no good reason to exist. Picture the climb. Steep hollows, dense hardwood, no road to the top worth the name, and then, along the ridgeline, wall after wall of carefully stacked rock, running in segments that early reports totaled at multiple miles. They have been documented since the 1800s and have drawn repeated archaeological attention across the 20th century. Every visit ends the same way: measurements, notes, no verdict. The summit has no water source, which rules out a defended settlement. The terrain rules out agriculture. Nobody terraces a mountaintop above the Kanawha for crops. The construction is not colonial, and the labor involved is wildly out of proportion to any known settlement nearby. Not defensive, not agricultural, not colonial, the walls simply refuse every category offered to them, which makes Mount Carbon one of the least explained stone complexes in the eastern United States. Meanwhile, traffic runs the river valley below on Route 60, past a town most people never stop in, under a mountain most people never look up at. West Virginia's most confusing construction project predates West Virginia. Number 3. Track Rock Gap, Union County, Georgia. In 2012, a set of stone terraces climbing a mountainside in Union County, Georgia, briefly convinced a large chunk of the internet that the Maya had relocated to Appalachia. Track Rock Gap, in the Chattahoochee National Forest near Blairsville, holds more than 100 rock walls and terrace structures stepping up the slope, plus soapstone boulders carved with petroglyphs accumulated over centuries. Stand at the bottom and look up. Engineered stone agriculture, climbing a Georgia mountain in ordered steps. It is a genuinely remarkable sight, and it is sacred to both the Cherokee and the Muskogee. Then a viral article declared it a lost Maya city. The story detonated online, and the U.S. Forest Service, along with Cherokee representatives, had to issue the least surprising correction in American archaeology. The terraces were built by ancestral native people of this region. The debunking is the real story here. Faced with sophisticated stone engineering in the Georgia mountains, thousands of readers found it easier to import builders from Central America than to accept that local indigenous people terraced their own hillsides. People believed in Maya refugees before they believed in Cherokee engineers. The builders were local the whole time, and they were never lost to the people who remembered them. Number 2. Old Stone Fort, Manchester, Coffee County, Tennessee. Near Manchester, Tennessee, where the forks of the Duck River meet, stands a 2,000-year-old walled enclosure that took roughly 400 years to build and was never lived in. Let that timeline register. 400 years is the distance between us and the Mayflower. 20 generations of builders, each inheriting the project, working on it, and handing it forward. The perimeter of mounded earth and stone runs close to 1.25 miles, enclosing a plateau bordered on two sides by rivers and waterfalls. The builders only walled the gaps nature left open, which tells you they read this landscape perfectly. The entrance is the giveaway, a long corridor of parallel walls oriented so that on the summer solstice, the sunrise comes straight down the passage like a key sliding into a lock. Settlers who found it reached for every explanation except the right one. De Soto's men, Vikings, a lost race, before archaeology settled it as a woodland period ceremonial enclosure. And here is what excavation found inside. Nothing. No houses, no hearths, no trash, no burials, 4 centuries of maintained construction, and no one ever moved in because living there was never the point. It was architecture for gathering, ceremony, and sky. They built it for 400 years and never once moved in. Number 1. Fort Mountain Stone Wall, Chatsworth, Murray County, Georgia. Every site on this list has at least one theory that mostly works. Number 1 is here because every theory ever offered has a hole in it. In Fort Mountain State Park, in the Cohutta Mountains above Chatsworth, an 885-foot wall zigzags along the summit, up to 7 feet high in places, no mortar, punctuated by shallow pits and what may be collapsed gateways, on a mountaintop with no water source. Walk it at dusk, when the light goes sideways through the pines and the wall keeps switching direction underfoot for no reason anyone can name. And you understand why this place collects stories. Woodland period ceremony fits the archaeology best, but the site has never yielded a definitive answer. De Soto's expedition passed through the region, but Spaniards in a hurry don't build an 885-foot wall. Maddox's Welshmen appear here too. Folklore. Chasing folklore up one more mountain. And then there is the Cherokee tradition, older than all the European guessing, that the wall was raised by the moon-eyed people, pale, light-sensitive beings who could see in the dark, driven out of these mountains long before European contact. It's a legend, and it should be told as one. But sit with the timeline. The wall was already standing when the first Europeans climbed up and asked about it. The answer they received is the same answer you'll get from a park ranger today, 4 centuries later. Nobody knows. On this mountain, that's not a gap in the research. That's the oldest tradition of all. Appalachia isn't old because of its music or its mines. These ridgelines were already somebody's architecture before any of that arrived. If your county has a wall, a stone pile, or a ruin that locals mention and never explain, put it in the comments, because that's how half of this list was found. Subscribe and watch the next video on screen. This map still has missing pages.